Chapter 1. Late. Honestly, Amanda Perkins knew she was late before the elevator doors even opened. Not just a few minutes late, the forgivable kind you could wave off with a quick apology and a practiced smile, but the kind of late that settled into your chest like a stone. The kind that made you consider turning around, going home, and pretending you never agreed to meet a near stranger at a restaurant with cloth napkins and reservations. She checked her phone again, though she had already memorized the time. 26 minutes. Of course, she muttered, stepping out onto the softly lit lobby floor. Why not round it up to 30 and make it a clean disaster? Her reflection in the polished brass panel beside the host's stand confirmed what she already suspected. She looked like someone who had tried very hard to appear effortless and had instead achieved carefully disheveled. A strand of hair refused to stay tucked behind her ear, and her blouse bore the faintest wrinkle from where she'd been leaning over her desk only an hour ago, convinced she could just finish one more thing before leaving. One more thing had turned into 4 emails, a last-minute revision, and a conference call that should have ended 10 minutes sooner but didn't. She exhaled slowly. You could make an excuse. There are plenty available. Traffic. Work emergency. A sudden headache with impressive detail. Instead, Amanda straightened her shoulders and approached the host. "Hi," she said, her voice steady despite the faint hum of anxiety underneath. "I'm meeting someone. Daniel Hale." The host's polite smile didn't waver. "Of course. He's already seated. Right this way." Of course he was. Amanda followed, each step echoing louder in her mind than on the floor. She rehearsed something, anything, to soften the moment. A light joke, perhaps, a quick explanation. Something that would make her lateness seem less deliberate. Except it wasn't deliberate. It just was. And for once, she was tired of decorating reality to make it more palatable. The host stopped at a small table near the back, a quieter corner, tucked away from the busier sections. Daniel was already seated, a glass of water in front of him. His posture relaxed in a way that didn't look rehearsed. He looked up when she approached. His expression wasn't annoyed, or impatient, or even particularly curious. If anything, it was open, steady. It threw her off balance more than irritation would have. "Amanda?" he asked, standing as she reached the table. "Yes," she said. There was a brief, suspended moment where she could have stepped into any number of familiar scripts. Instead, she met his eyes and said, "I'm so sorry for being late. I completely mismanaged my time." The words landed cleanly between them. No embellishment. No excuse stitched into the edges. Daniel blinked. Not dramatically. Just enough to register that something unexpected had happened. "Oh," he said after a second. Amanda waited, resisting the urge to fill the silence. Then, to her surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted. "That's refreshing," he said. She let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. "It's also true." "I believe you," he said simply, gesturing toward the seat across from him. "Please sit." She did, setting her bag down carefully to keep her hands occupied. "I wasn't sure whether to order or wait," he continued. "I decided water was a safe middle ground." "Smart choice," Amanda said. "I would have felt worse if you were halfway through dinner." "I wasn't in a rush," he replied. Something in the way he said it, calm, unforced, made her pause. "I appreciate your patience," she said. Daniel tilted his head slightly, as if considering something. "Can I ask you a question?" he said. "Sure." "Was this time today actually convenient for you?" The question landed somewhere unexpected. Amanda frowned lightly. "I mean, I made it work. Mostly." "That sounds like a polite way of saying, not really." She hesitated, then shrugged. "I thought it would be fine when I agreed. My schedule just expanded." "That happens." "It does," she said, a small smile forming despite herself. "Often, apparently." Daniel nodded, leaning back slightly in his chair. "Then I have a proposal," he said. Amanda raised an eyebrow. "That sounds official." "It isn't," he said, though there was a trace of quiet assurance in his tone. "It's more of a guideline. I'm listening." "If we do this again," he said, "we don't pick a time you have to squeeze into. No rushing from work, no trying to make everything fit. We choose something that actually works for you." Amanda stared at him. "That seems." She searched for the right word and came up short. "Unusual." "Why?" She let out a small, incredulous breath. "Most people would expect the effort, or at least an explanation. Something to justify why they've been waiting." "I wasn't waiting to be justified," Daniel said. "I was waiting to meet you." The simplicity of it disarmed her more than any charm could have. "And besides," he added, "I'm not trying to control your time. I'm trying to be part of it." The words settled into her chest with unexpected weight. Amanda felt something shift, quietly, almost imperceptibly, but definitively. Her eyes widened slightly before she could stop herself. "Oh," she said softly. Daniel's expression didn't change much, but there was a flicker of something, recognition maybe, that passed through his gaze. "Too much?" he asked. "No," Amanda said quickly, then shook her head, more certain. "No, it's just not what I expected." "What were you expecting?" She considered that. Honestly, she said, something more complicated. I tend to prefer simple, he said. Simple doesn't mean careless. I can see that, she replied. There was a pause then, not awkward but thoughtful. The kind that invited rather than demanded conversation. A server approached, breaking the moment gently, and they ordered without much ceremony. Amanda found herself studying Daniel as he spoke, his tone steady, his presence unhurried. There was no sense of him trying to impress her, no subtle maneuvering to steer the conversation in a particular direction. He asked questions, yes, but he listened to the answers in a way that suggested he actually intended to remember them. It was unexpected, and the more they talked, the more Amanda became aware of something else. She wasn't performing, not in the small, habitual ways she usually did, polishing her responses, shaping her reactions, adjusting her energy to match what she assumed was expected. Here she could pause, think, even say, I'm not sure, without feeling like she was losing ground. At one point, she caught herself mid-sentence and laughed. What? Daniel asked. I just realized I'm not trying very hard, she said. That sounds concerning, he replied lightly. It should be, she said. But it isn't. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. Good, he said. Then we're both saving energy. Amanda smiled, something warm and genuine settling in her chest. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Are you always this calm about things? He considered the question. Not always, he said. But I try not to make things more complicated than they need to be. And time isn't complicated? She asked. Time is very straightforward, he said. People tend to complicate it. She laughed softly. That sounds like something you've thought about before. I have. Because? Because I've learned that rushing tends to ruin things that would have worked if you just let them unfold properly. The words lingered. Amanda felt that same quiet shift again. Subtle, but steady. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't trying to outrun the moment. She was sitting in it. And surprisingly, she liked what she saw. Chapter 2. No rush required. Amanda expected the next message to feel loaded. That was usually how it worked. First dates led to carefully timed follow-ups, subtle interpretations, and unnecessary decoding. A simple "I had a good time" could spiral into an entire internal analysis about tone, punctuation, and implied expectation. So when her phone buzzed the next afternoon, while she was reorganizing her inbox, she braced herself. Daniel, I enjoyed our conversation. Let me know when your schedule has room again. Amanda stared at the message for longer than necessary. No question mark. No suggestion of a specific day. No gentle pressure disguised as enthusiasm. Just space. She leaned back in her chair, letting the quiet settle around her office. The hum of her computer and the distant murmur of coworkers filtered in, but her attention stayed anchored to the simplicity of those words. Let me know when your schedule has room again. It wasn't passive. It wasn't indifferent. It was patient. She murmured, tapping her phone lightly against her desk. Most responses she could predict. This one didn't fit her usual expectations, which made it oddly compelling. She typed a reply, paused, erased it, then tried again. Amanda, I enjoyed it too. This week is a little chaotic, but Thursday evening might actually work. She hesitated, rereading it. Sounded honest, grounded. She hit send. The response came much later, hours actually, after she'd already wrapped up her workday and was halfway through making dinner. Daniel, Thursday evening sounds good. No need to force it if things shift. Amanda exhaled a quiet laugh. Of course he'd say that. She set her phone down on the counter and returned to chopping vegetables, but something about the exchange lingered. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even particularly romantic in the conventional sense, but it felt easy. Thursday arrived without the usual sense of pressure Amanda associated with dates. She noticed it around mid-afternoon, when she checked the time and realized she wasn't watching the clock with mounting anxiety. There was no frantic mental countdown, no list of unfinished tasks growing heavier by the minute. Instead, she worked steadily, finishing what she could and leaving what she couldn't without guilt pressing at her shoulders. At 6:30, she closed her laptop. At 6:35, she was still sitting at her desk, not rushing. It was a strange feeling, choosing when to leave rather than escaping. When she finally stepped out into the evening air, her pace was unhurried. The city moved around her in its usual rhythm, cars passing, conversations drifting, but she felt oddly separate from the urgency of it all. The restaurant this time was her choice, a quieter place, tucked between a bookstore and a florist. It felt intentional rather than convenient. Daniel was already there when she arrived, not waiting in a way that made her feel guilty, just present. He looked up as she approached, offering a small, genuine smile. Hi, he said. Hi, she replied, slipping into the seat across from him. I'm on time. Exactly on time, he said, glancing briefly at his watch. Impressive, she smiled. I didn't have to sprint here. A promising start. It is, she agreed. There was a quiet ease between them as they settled in. The server came and went, leaving menus and water, but Amanda noticed something immediately. She wasn't mentally calculating how long she had. I wasn't sure if Thursday would actually hold, Daniel said, folding his menu without looking at it. It almost didn't, Amanda admitted. But I moved a few things around yesterday instead of hoping today would magically give me extra time. A strategic move. I'm experimenting with this whole not overcommitting concept, she said. It's very new. And how does it feel so far? Amanda tilted her head, considering. Suspiciously calm. That's usually a good sign. She laughed softly. You say that like you've conducted research. Only through trial and error, he said. Mostly error earlier on. Defined how? Daniel leaned back slightly, thoughtful. I used to think being available all the time was the same as being present, he said. It isn't. Amanda's eyebrows lifted. That sounds like a lesson learned the hard way. It usually is. She watched him for a moment, noticing how he didn't rush his explanations. He didn't seem afraid of pauses, or of choosing his words carefully. And now? She asked. Now I prefer moments that are actually intentional, he said. Even if there are fewer of them. Quality over quantity, Amanda said. Something like that. Their food arrived, interrupting the conversation briefly, and Amanda found herself relaxing further as they continued talking. About work, about habits, about the way people structure their time as if it were an infinite resource rather than something finite. At one point, she caught herself apologizing mid-thought. Sorry, I'm rambling, she said, instinctively. Daniel shook his head. You're explaining something you care about. That still counts as rambling. I don't mind it. Amanda paused. You really don't rush conversations, do you? She said. No, he answered simply. Why would I? Most people do. There's this invisible pacing expectation. Like you have to keep things moving or you'll lose momentum. Momentum toward what? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I'm not sure, she admitted. That's kind of the point, I guess. Daniel's expression softened slightly. If the conversation is worth having, it doesn't need to be rushed. Amanda leaned back in her chair, studying him. You make things sound straightforward, she said. They usually are, he replied. We tend to complicate them. That's the second time you've said something like that. Then I might believe it. She shook her head, amused. You're consistent. I'll give you that. I try to be. There was something grounding about that answer. Not impressive in a flashy way, not wrapped in grand gestures, just steady. Amanda realized, with a faint sense of surprise, that she wasn't trying to impress him either. She wasn't scanning for reactions, adjusting her tone to match his, or subtly shaping the way she presented herself. She was just there. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Do you ever worry that this approach could come across as disinterest? Daniel considered that for a moment. Sometimes, he said. But I found that people who need constant reassurance don't tend to be comfortable with space. And you're okay with that? She asked. I'd rather be honest about how I show up than pretend to be something else, he said. It saves time in the long run. Amanda nodded slowly. That makes sense, she said. I think. She hesitated, searching for the right words. I think I've been so used to things feeling urgent that I didn't realize how exhausting it was. Urgency can feel like importance, Daniel said. Even when it isn't. She let that settle. Yeah, she said quietly. That sounds about right. They finished dinner without any sense of rushing toward an ending. When the check came, it felt like a natural pause rather than a signal that the evening had to conclude. Outside, the evening air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. Amanda walked beside him, hands tucked lightly into her coat pockets. This worked, she said after a few steps. It did, Daniel agreed. No scrambling, no reshuffling 10 things at the last minute. No apologies required. She smiled. I'm a fan of that. So am I. They stopped at the corner where their paths would split. There was a brief, quiet moment, an unspoken acknowledgement of something still unfolding. I'll check my schedule tomorrow, Amanda said, then paused. Not in a rushed way. Daniel smiled. I trust your judgment. She studied him for a second, that same quiet shift returning. I think, she said slowly, I'm starting to trust it too. Good, he said. That's the important part. Amanda nodded, feeling something steady settle into place. As she turned to leave, she realized that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't wondering what came next out of anxiety. She was simply curious, and that felt like forward movement. Chapter 3. Space that feels like closeness. Amanda didn't notice when the shift became a pattern. At first, it was just small things, subtle adjustments in the way her days unfolded. She scheduled meetings with a bit more intention. She declined invitations without over-explaining. She stopped volunteering time she didn't actually have. And somewhere within that quiet realignment, Daniel's presence settled into her life. Not as a disruption, not as something competing for her attention, but as something integrated. Surprised her. Because if she was honest, every relationship she'd had before carried a certain friction. Even at their best, there had been an undercurrent of negotiation. How much time to give, how quickly to respond, how to balance everything without letting something slip. With Daniel, there was no constant recalibration. There was just space. And somehow, that space didn't feel like distance, felt like closeness. 3 weeks after their first date, Amanda found herself still at her desk well past sunset, staring at a spreadsheet that had long since stopped making sense. Her eyes ached. Her thoughts were scattered. She leaned back, pressing a hand lightly against her forehead. "This isn't working," she murmured. Her phone buzzed softly beside her laptop. She glanced at it without much expectation. "Daniel, are you still working? Or have you escaped?" Amanda huffed a quiet laugh. "Amanda, define escaped." "Daniel, you've left your desk and can identify at least one non-work-related thought." She considered that. "Amanda, then no. I'm still very much trapped." There was a brief pause before the reply came. "Daniel, would you like to stop?" Amanda blinked at the screen. "Would you like to stop?" It was such a straightforward question, but it stopped her mid-thought. "Obviously," she muttered under her breath. "Yes, I would love to stop." And yet she hadn't. She stared at her work again, then back at her phone. "Amanda, yes, but I can't just leave it unfinished." "Daniel, is it urgent? Or does it feel urgent?" She frowned at that. "Amanda, that feels like a trick question." "Daniel, it isn't." Amanda exhaled, leaning back further in her chair. She looked at the numbers again, at the way the details blurred together after hours of overstimulation. "Amanda, it feels urgent." The pause was slightly longer this time. "Daniel, then stepping away might actually help." Amanda stared at the message, something in her chest loosening just slightly. He wasn't telling her what to do. He wasn't insisting. He was offering perspective. She glanced at the clock. 8:42 p.m. "Okay," she said aloud, as if confirming it made it more real. "Amanda, if I walk away, I'm holding you responsible for my productivity tomorrow." "Daniel, I'll take that risk." A half smile curved at her mouth. Amanda shut her laptop. The transition from work mode to everything else was always jarring. But that night, it felt lighter. She stepped outside her building, the cool air brushing gently against her skin, and inhaled deeply. Her thoughts didn't immediately rush back in. Instead, there was quiet. Her phone buzzed again. "Daniel, did you actually leave? Or are you pretending to for my benefit?" Amanda laughed softly as she started down the sidewalk. "Amanda, I'm outside. This is real." "Daniel, impressive. Should I be proud of you?" Amanda slowed slightly at the question, her smile lingering. "Amanda, you can be supportive without making it weird." There was a beat. "Daniel, I'll try again." Good call stepping away. She considered that for a moment. There was something about the way he said it, simple, direct, without exaggeration, that made it land more clearly than praise usually did. "Amanda, that works." "Daniel, what are you doing now?" Amanda glanced around. The city was quieter than usual, or maybe she was just noticing it differently. "Amanda, walking. Clearing my head." "Daniel, good plan." She hesitated, then typed. "Amanda, what are you doing?" "Daniel, reading." "Amanda, of course you are." "Daniel, is that predictable?" "Amanda, a little." "Daniel, I'm comfortable with that." She smiled, slipping her phone into her pocket for a moment as she crossed the street. When she pulled it out again, she didn't rush to respond. And that, more than anything, was new. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued without needing to be defined. They didn't talk constantly. Some days, they barely exchanged more than a few messages. Other days, their conversations stretched longer, thoughtful, meandering, unforced. And yet, Amanda never felt like she was losing ground when there was silence. She felt steady. One afternoon, as she packed up her things at the office, her coworker Jenna leaned over the divider. "So," Jenna said, her tone carrying that unmistakable thread of curiosity, "are you still seeing that guy?" Amanda looked up, mildly surprised. "Daniel?" she said. "Yeah." Jenna crossed her arms, leaning casually against the partition. "And?" she pressed. Amanda paused. It was a simple question, but it didn't have a simple answer. "He's consistent," she said finally. Jenna raised an eyebrow. "That's your review? Consistent. It's a good thing," Amanda said, a faint smile forming. "I didn't say it wasn't," Jenna replied. "It just sounds understated." Amanda considered that. "Maybe," she said, "but it's also rare." Jenna tilted her head. "How so?" Amanda glanced down at the file she was holding, then set it aside. "He doesn't expect me to rearrange my entire life to see him," she said. "He doesn't get weird if I'm busy. He just shows up when we've both actually made the space." Jenna watched her for a moment. "That doesn't sound like a downside," she said. "It's not," Amanda agreed. "So what's the catch?" Amanda laughed softly. "You're assuming there is one." "There's always one," Jenna said lightly. Amanda shook her head, but the question lingered. What was the catch? Later that evening, she found herself thinking about it as she sat across from Daniel in a small cafe, steam curling gently from the mugs between them. "You're quiet," he observed. Amanda looked up. "Am I?" "A little," he said. "Not in a bad way." She traced a finger lightly along the edge of her cup. I was just thinking about something someone said today, she admitted. Do you want to share it? She hesitated, then nodded. They asked what the catch was, she said. Daniel's expression didn't change, but there was a faint shift in his posture, more attentive. And, he asked. I realized I didn't have an answer, Amanda said. That sounds positive. It does, she agreed. But it also made me wonder if I was missing something. Daniel leaned back slightly, considering her. Do you feel like you're missing something? He asked. Amanda met his gaze, thinking carefully. No, she said after a moment. That's the strange part. Then why assume there's a problem? She let out a small breath, almost laughing. Because there usually is, she said. Or at least that's how it's felt before. Daniel nodded slowly. It can be uncomfortable when something doesn't follow the patterns you're used to, he said. That's exactly it, Amanda said, relief flickering in her expression. It's like I'm waiting for something to tilt. And it hasn't. No. There was a brief pause. And if it doesn't? Daniel asked. Amanda blinked. If it doesn't, she repeated. What if things are just working, he said. The idea settled between them. Simple, unadorned, and yet somehow radical. Amanda looked at him for a long moment. You don't fill the silence, she said suddenly. Daniel's eyebrow lifted slightly. Should I? No, she said quickly. I just noticed it. He smiled faintly. I don't mind silence. It gives people room to think. Amanda nodded slowly. That's kind of what you're doing in general, isn't it? She said. Giving space. If space helps, then yes. And if it didn't? She challenged lightly. Then I'd adjust, he said. The answer came easily, without defensiveness. Amanda felt something settle again. That same quiet certainty that had been building over time. This wasn't distance. It wasn't disinterest. It wasn't a lack of effort disguised as independence. It was intentional. And more importantly, it included her. She leaned back in her chair, her expression softening. You make it feel stable, she said almost to herself. Daniel didn't react immediately. When he did, his voice was gentle. That's the goal. Amanda held his gaze, something quiet and certain taking shape beneath the surface. For the first time, the lack of urgency didn't feel like absence, felt like foundation. And she realized, with a kind of calm clarity, that she wasn't bracing for something to go wrong. She was starting to trust that it might actually go right. Chapter 4. Returning the favor, Amanda didn't decide to change her approach all at once. It wasn't a dramatic realization or a moment marked by sudden clarity. Instead, it began quietly, through observation, through repetition, through the steady realization that Daniel wasn't doing anything extraordinary by his own standards. He wasn't performing generosity or patience. He was simply consistent. And the more she recognized that, the more she felt something shift within herself. If this was how he showed up, steady, spacious, intentional, then maybe she could meet him there. It started with something small. They were sitting on opposite sides of a park bench one late afternoon, the golden edge of early evening settling over the open space. Amanda had arrived first this time, something that still felt like a small personal victory. Daniel joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 coffees. You trusted my order? She said as he handed one over. I paid attention, he replied. She took a sip, then gave a small nod. You did. Good, he said, sitting beside her. That would have been disappointing otherwise. Amanda smiled, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. There was a comfortable silence between them as people passed by. Joggers, dog walkers, couples moving at their own pace. Amanda found herself watching them without the usual commentary forming in her mind. She didn't feel the need to fill the space. And for once, she realized she didn't feel the need to take anything from it either. You notice things, she said, glancing at him. Daniel turned slightly. What kind of things? Details, she said. Preferences. Timing. When to step in and when not to. He considered that, then nodded. I try to. Amanda studied him for a moment, her tone shifting. More deliberate now, less casual. You're good at it, she said. The reaction was almost immediate. Daniel looked away briefly, his expression tightening just enough to register. It's not complicated, he said. Amanda tilted her head slightly. That wasn't what I said, she replied gently. He exhaled through his nose, a quiet, thoughtful sound. I know, he said. I just don't think of it as something worth highlighting. Why not? Daniel hesitated. The pause wasn't defensive, it was searching. Because it should be normal, he said finally. Paying attention, being consistent, that's just baseline, isn't it? Amanda turned her body slightly toward him. It should be, she said. But that doesn't mean it always is. Daniel didn't immediately respond. And Amanda, perhaps for the first time, didn't rush to soften what she'd said. She let it sit. You don't like being complimented, she observed after a moment. Daniel's mouth curved faintly, though there was uncertainty in it. I don't mind it, he said. That's not the same thing. No, he admitted. She watched him carefully, learning something without needing him to explain it outright. You redirect it, she said. Or minimize it. He let out a quiet breath. That sounds accurate. Why? Another pause. Amanda could feel the difference this time, not just in him but in herself. She wasn't pushing. She wasn't trying to extract something from him. She was just offering him the same space he gave her. It's easier, he said at last. If you don't attach too much importance to those things, you can just keep doing them. Amanda frowned slightly. That feels backward, she said. How so? If something matters, shouldn't you acknowledge it? She asked. Otherwise, how do you recognize its value? Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. I think acknowledging it can sometimes turn it into something you have to maintain, he said. Like a standard that gets watched too closely. And that's a problem? It can be, he said, if it changes how you approach it. Amanda considered that. So you'd rather just be consistent without the attention? She said. That's the idea. She nodded slowly, absorbing the answer. There was something in it, something careful, something almost protective, that made her pause. You don't trust praise, she said quietly. Daniel looked at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his expression. That's one way to put it, he said. Amanda felt that quiet certainty settle again. Not a conclusion, but an understanding. You don't think it's meant to last, she added. He didn't answer immediately. That, in itself, felt like an answer. They walked after that, moving through the park without any defined direction. Amanda kept her hands in her coat pockets again, more out of habit than necessity. She thought about what she'd noticed, not just what Daniel had said, but what he hadn't. There was a difference between someone who rejected attention and someone who wasn't used to it meaning anything. And Daniel didn't seem dismissive. He seemed cautious. Can I try something? She said suddenly. Daniel glanced at her. That depends on what it is. Amanda smiled slightly. Nothing dramatic. I'm listening. She slowed her pace just enough to turn toward him. You are consistent, she said, her voice steady. You pay attention in a way that feels intentional, not performative. You don't make things feel urgent just to prove they matter. And that, she paused briefly, choosing her words carefully, that makes this feel solid. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't deflect. But she could see the tension there, the instinct to minimize the habit of redirecting. Amanda held his gaze. You don't have to say anything, she added. I just want you to hear it. There was a long moment where he said nothing. Then finally he nodded once. Okay, he said quietly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't effusive. But it wasn't dismissive either. And somehow that mattered more. Amanda felt a small, unexpected sense of satisfaction settle into her chest. Not because she'd managed to get a reaction out of him, but because she hadn't tried to. She'd simply said what she meant. You're doing that thing, Daniel said after a moment. What thing? Not filling the silence, he said. Amanda smiled. I'm learning from you. I'm not sure how I feel about that. You'll adjust, she said lightly. He huffed a quiet laugh. I probably will. Later that evening, Amanda found herself reflecting on the conversation as she sat at her kitchen table, a half-finished mug of tea cooling beside her. It was strange, in a way. She'd spent so much time in past relationships trying to prove things, trying to show up in ways that would be noticed, appreciated, validated. And here, she wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just responding, matching what was already there. Her phone buzzed softly. Daniel, did I survive your experiment? Amanda smiled, picking up her phone. Amanda, barely. Daniel, that sounds serious. Amanda, you didn't deflect. That's progress. There was a pause before his reply came through. Daniel, I noticed. Amanda leaned back in her chair, her smile widening slightly. Amanda, was it uncomfortable? Another pause. Daniel, a little. Amanda considered that, then typed, Amanda, that's okay. The response came more quickly this time. Daniel, I figured you'd say that. She huffed a soft laugh. Amanda, I'm not going to stop just because it's unfamiliar. Daniel, I didn't think you would. Amanda stared at the screen for a moment, something quiet and steady settling into place again. She wasn't pushing him out of his comfort zone. She wasn't trying to change him. She was simply widening the space, the same way he had done for her. And maybe, just maybe, that was how something like this worked. Not through force or urgency, but through patience, through consistency, through the quiet willingness to meet each other where they already stood, and stay long enough for it to mean something. Chapter 5, What He Doesn't Say. Amanda didn't go looking for answers. That was the first notable difference. In past relationships, curiosity had often come with urgency, the need to understand, define, and label everything before it could shift or disappear. Questions were asked not just to know, but to secure. With Daniel, there was no sense of something slipping through her fingers. There was space. And in that space, she began to notice things she might have otherwise tried to force into words too quickly. It happened gradually, through moments that by themselves felt insignificant. A pause just a second longer than expected. The way he listened when she spoke about her work, really listened, not just nodding or waiting for his turn, but engaging with the finer details without making a spectacle of it. the subtle way his tone shifted when the conversation turned toward himself. Quieter, more measured, as if choosing his words required a different kind of effort. And then there were the silences. Not empty ones, but full, layered, intentional pauses where something wasn't said, yet wasn't hidden either. Amanda began to recognize them. And more importantly, she stopped trying to fill them. One evening, about a month into their steady, unhurried progression, Amanda found herself invited into Daniel's space for the first time. It wasn't framed as a milestone. There was no weight placed on it. It came up naturally, folded into the end of a conversation. "I've been reorganizing my place," he said as they walked side by side along a quiet street. Nothing dramatic, just small adjustments. Amanda glanced at him, a hint of amusement in her expression. "That sounds very on brand for you. I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," she said. He nodded once, then added, "You're welcome to come by if you'd like to see it." The invitation was simple, open, no expectation attached. Amanda felt that familiar, quiet sense of grounding settle in her chest. "I'd like that," she said, and she meant it without second-guessing. His apartment was exactly what she expected. Not in an obvious way, but in its feel. Everything had a place, but nothing felt rigid. The space was clean without being sterile, comfortable without feeling cluttered. There were books, organized but not untouched, alongside small, practical details that suggested he lived there fully rather than just maintaining it. "You weren't exaggerating about the small adjustments," she said, stepping further in. "I try not to exaggerate," he replied, setting his keys down. Amanda walked slowly, taking things in without the need to comment on every detail. "This feels like you," she said after a moment. Daniel glanced at her. "That could mean many things." "It means it's intentional," she said. "Nothing here feels random." "That's fair." She turned slightly, leaning back against the edge of the kitchen counter. "And it doesn't feel like it's trying to impress anyone," she added. His mouth curved faintly. "That's also intentional." "I figured." There was a quiet pause, familiar now, comfortable. Amanda let her gaze drift briefly before returning to him. "You don't perform," she said. Daniel's expression shifted, just slightly. "That sounds more significant than it is," he replied. "I don't think it does," Amanda said. "I think it's rare." He considered that without immediately responding. Amanda didn't press. Instead, she walked over to the bookshelf, scanning the titles. "You read a lot of nonfiction," she observed. "I like understanding how things work," he said. "People included?" Pause. "Yes," he said finally. Amanda turned, watching him carefully. "That must get complicated," she said lightly. "It can," he admitted. She studied him for a moment longer, then asked, "Do you like being understood?" The question landed differently. She could see it. Not discomfort exactly, but a kind of stillness, as if the question required something more than a surface-level answer. "I think everyone likes that," he said. "That's not what I asked." He held her gaze. She didn't look away. Another pause. Longer this time. Amanda didn't rush it, didn't soften the question or offer him an easier path out of it. Finally, Daniel exhaled. Slow, quiet. "I'm not always used to it," he said. There it was again. Not resistance. Not deflection. Just honesty, careful, deliberate. Amanda nodded. "That makes sense," she said. He seemed almost surprised by that. "It does?" he asked. "Yes," she replied simply. "You don't lean on it. You don't expect people to notice things. That assumes people usually do." She smiled slightly. "They don't. Not like you do." He looked down briefly as if considering how to respond, then back up at her. "And you've decided to point it out anyway?" he said. Amanda tilted her head. "I've decided not to ignore it," she corrected. Another quiet moment settled between them. Amanda felt something distinct take shape. Not a conclusion, not a realization wrapped in certainty, but a growing awareness. Daniel didn't just struggle with praise. He seemed unfamiliar with being seen in a way that wasn't transactional. There was no practiced response, no automatic acceptance, just caution, as if recognition came with expectation attached. Later, as they sat across from each other with a simple dinner they'd put together without much planning, Amanda found her thoughts returning to that realization. "You're very attentive," she said, almost casually. Daniel looked up from his glass. "You've mentioned that." "I know," she said. "I'm not repeating myself. I'm refining the observation." That earned her a quiet huff of laughter. "Go on," he said. "It's not performative," she continued. "It's not about getting a reaction. It's just how you operate." He didn't interrupt. "And it's consistent," she added. "Not just with me, but in general." Daniel leaned back slightly. "You're analyzing me," he said. Amanda smiled faintly. "A little. Should I be concerned?" "No," she said, then after a beat. "You might just have to accept that I notice things too." He considered her for a moment. "That's fair," he said. "You don't make it easy, though," she added lightly. "In what way?" "You don't offer extra information," she said. "You answer what's asked, but you don't expand unless it feels necessary." That sounds efficient. It also sounds careful. Another pause. Daniel didn't immediately respond. Amanda felt that familiar sense of stepping into something unspoken and choosing to stay there instead of retreating. You don't leave much open to interpretation, she said softly. He held her gaze. That's intentional, he said. Amanda nodded slowly. I know, she replied. And she did. She could see it now, not just in what he said, but in what he chose not to say. There was a clarity in his actions. A quiet firmness that didn't waver depending on mood or circumstance. He didn't create ambiguity where none was needed. He didn't invite confusion. And yet, when it came to himself, to how he saw his own value, that clarity softened into something more uncertain. Amanda leaned back slightly, her expression thoughtful. You don't think of yourself as exceptional in this area, do you? She asked. Daniel's brow furrowed faintly. I think of it as baseline, he said. That's not the same thing. It is to me. Amanda studied him. And then, quietly, without emphasis, she said, it shouldn't be. He blinked, just slightly. Not startled. Just caught. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. But it wasn't light either. It held something. Something real. Daniel didn't dismiss her. Didn't argue. He just sat with it. And for the first time, Amanda noticed something else. Not in his words, but in the space between them. He wasn't uncomfortable with her. He was uncomfortable with how she saw him. That difference mattered. Later, as she stepped out into the cool night air, Amanda felt something settle into place with a kind of quiet certainty she hadn't expected. She wasn't trying to decode him anymore. She wasn't trying to predict or secure anything. She was simply observing. And what she saw was steady, consistent, unambiguous in the ways that mattered. Daniel wasn't someone who said everything, but he never left the important things unclear. And somehow, that meant more than any carefully constructed declaration ever could. As Amanda walked home, her thoughts calm and unhurried, one realization stayed with her. Clear and unwavering. He didn't treat her like a passing phase. He didn't leave room for that interpretation. And he didn't seem to realize just how much that mattered. Not yet, but she did. Chapter 6. The Chorus of Doubt. Amanda didn't bring Daniel up to her friends right away. It wasn't intentional, not at first. There simply hadn't been a natural opening. No moment where it felt necessary to explain something that didn't yet need explaining. What she had with him was still unfolding. Not fragile, but private in a way she didn't feel compelled to broadcast. But privacy, she quickly realized, was not the same thing as invisibility. Eventually, the questions came. It started on a Friday evening, the kind that carried an expectation of energy before anyone even decided what to do with it. Amanda arrived a few minutes early at the restaurant her friends had chosen. A lively place filled with overlapping conversations and music that walked the line between background and intrusion. It was the kind of environment she used to find energizing without effort. Now she noticed it more. Not negatively, just differently. You're early, Claire said, sliding into the chair across from her a few minutes later, her tone laced with mild suspicion. Amanda shrugged lightly. Traffic wasn't as bad as I expected. Claire narrowed her eyes. Who are you? And what have you done with Amanda Perkins? Amanda smiled, reaching for her glass of water. She evolved into someone punctual? Claire laughed. That's concerning. Before Amanda could respond, two more of her friends, Lena and Marcus, joined them, bringing with them a burst of energy that instantly shifted the dynamic. All right, Lena said, dropping into her seat and leaning forward. What's new? Marcus glanced around the table. And don't say nothing. That's never true. Amanda hesitated, not because she didn't want to share, but because she knew, instinctively, that once she did, the conversation would take on a different shape. There's someone, she said finally. The reaction was immediate. Claire straightened. Lena's eyes lit up. Marcus leaned back, a knowing expression settling in. There it is, Lena said. I knew something was different. How long? Marcus asked. A little over a month, Amanda replied. Claire's eyebrows lifted. And you're only telling us now? Amanda took a sip of her water, choosing her words. I wanted to understand what it was before I explained it, she said. Fair, Marcus said. So, who is he? Daniel, Amanda said. We met through a mutual connection. And, Lena pressed. What's he like? Amanda paused. The question felt bigger than it sounded. He's steady, she said. There was a brief silence. Not thoughtful. Evaluative. Claire tilted her head. Steady. Consistent, Amanda clarified. Intentional. He doesn't rush things. He actually makes space for them. Marcus frowned slightly. That sounds vague. It's not, Amanda said, more firmly than she intended. It just doesn't fit into the usual categories. Lena leaned forward, interest sharpening. Does he text you all the time? No. Good morning messages? Good night messages, Claire added. Amanda shook her head. No, not like that. Marcus raised an eyebrow. So what? He just disappears in between seeing you? No, Amanda said, a small thread of tension weaving into her voice. He doesn't disappear. He just doesn't fill space unnecessarily. That sounds like an excuse, Lena said. Amanda's gaze shifted to her. It's not, she said, more quietly now. It's intentional. Claire crossed her arms, studying her. And you're okay with that? She asked. Amanda didn't hesitate. Yes. You don't feel like you're being kept at a distance? Marcus added. Amanda shook her head. No, she said. I feel respected. That word landed differently. Claire's expression changed. Less teasing now, more serious. Okay, she said slowly. But that's how it starts sometimes. Amanda frowned. What do you mean? I mean, Claire continued. Some people play the long game. They show up calm, consistent, like they've got everything figured out. And then once you're invested, things change. Lena nodded. Exactly. It's strategic. Amanda stared at them, something tightening in her chest. You think he's pretending? She asked. I think, Marcus said carefully, that people don't stay exactly the same. That's not the same thing, Amanda said. It kind of is, Lena replied. Nobody's that steady all the time. Amanda let out a slow breath, trying to stay grounded. He's not trying to be impressive, she said. That's the point. Claire leaned in slightly. Or he knows that not trying to be impressive is impressive, she countered. Amanda blinked. She hadn't expected that. That feels like a stretch, Amanda said. Does it? Claire replied. Because I've seen that before. The conversation shifted after that. Orders were placed, other topics surfaced. But the undercurrent remained. Amanda could feel it. Each time Daniel's name came up, there was a subtle skepticism attached to it. Not outright dismissal, not harsh judgment, but doubt. Persistent. Unyielding. Later that night, as Amanda walked home alone, the city quieter now than it had been hours before, she let the conversation replay in her mind. Steady. Intentional. Too consistent. Playing the long game. She exhaled deeply, her breath visible in the cool air. It wasn't that her friends were wrong to question. They cared about her. They'd seen her in relationships before. Some chaotic, some intense, some that burned brightly before fading just as quickly. Of course, they were skeptical of something that didn't follow that pattern. But this didn't feel like those relationships. Not even close. Her phone buzzed softly in her coat pocket. Daniel, how was your evening? Amanda slowed her pace, pulling her phone out. She stared at the message for a moment before typing. Amanda. Lively. There was a brief pause. Daniel. That could mean many things. Amanda smiled faintly. Amanda. It involved strong opinions. Daniel. About something specific? She hesitated. Then, Amanda, you. The response didn't come immediately. And for the first time in weeks, Amanda felt something unfamiliar flicker at the edges of her thoughts. Not doubt. Not quite. Just awareness. Daniel, that's new. Amanda exhaled softly. Amanda. It was inevitable. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, Daniel. Was it constructive? Amanda stopped walking. She looked down at the message, reading it again. There was no defensiveness in it. No tension. Just a careful curiosity. And something else she hadn't expected. Restraint. Amanda leaned back against the side of a building, the cool brick grounding her. Amanda, they think you might be too good to be true. She hesitated, then added, Amanda, that you'll change later. The response came after a moment. Daniel, that's a common concern. Amanda's brow furrowed slightly. Amanda, you're very calm about this. Daniel, I don't control their perspective. Amanda nodded slowly, though he couldn't see it. Amanda, does it bother you? This time, the pause stretched longer. Amanda didn't rush it, didn't fill it. When his reply came, it was simple. Daniel, it would bother me more if it changed how you see things. Amanda felt something settle at that. Not because it was reassuring in an obvious way, but because it was direct. No vague reassurance. No attempt to argue against her friend's concerns. Just clarity. Amanda pushed off the wall, continuing her walk. Amanda, it doesn't. A beat. Then Daniel. All right. She smiled slightly. Amanda, you're not even going to defend yourself? He responded quickly this time. Daniel, I'd rather show up consistently than explain myself repeatedly. Amanda let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. Of course that's how he'd see it. She slipped her phone back into her pocket, her step steady again. Her friends' voices still lingered, but softer now, less certain. They saw patterns. They expected repetition. And maybe they weren't wrong, for the lives they were used to. But Amanda slowed slightly as she reached her building, her thoughts settling into something firm. Just because something was unfamiliar didn't mean it was false. Just because it didn't follow the same rhythm didn't mean it would collapse into it eventually. She paused at the entrance, her hand resting lightly against the door. Her friends liked excitement. They thrived on unpredictability, on intensity that rose and fell in dramatic arcs. And for a long time, she had too. But standing there now, the quiet of the night wrapping gently around her, Amanda realized something with a clarity that didn't require debate. She didn't want to keep reacting to life as it happened. She wanted to build it. And for the first time, she wasn't confused about what that might look like. She pulled the door open and stepped inside, the certainty settling into place. Not loud, not defiant, just steady. If her friends were all convinced he was the wrong person, then he was most likely exactly right for her life. Chapter 7. Choosing steady over spark. Amanda didn't argue with her friends. That, more than anything else, surprised her. There was a version of herself, one she knew well, that would have countered every point Claire made, challenged every assumption Lena voiced, and picked apart Marcus's careful skepticism until it unraveled into something less certain. She could have defended Daniel with precision, with conviction, with a sharp clarity that left no room for doubt. But she didn't. Instead, she listened. Not because she agreed with them, but because she understood them. There was a difference. It happened a few days after their dinner, when Claire texted her out of nowhere. "Claire, we should get coffee. Just us." Amanda stared at the message for a moment before replying. "Amanda, are you staging an intervention?" "Claire, don't make it dramatic." Amanda smiled faintly. "Amanda, that's a yes." "Claire, just come tomorrow morning." Amanda agreed. Because despite everything, she trusted her friends. Even when they were wrong. The cafe Claire chose was quieter than their usual spots, tucked into a corner where conversations stayed low and unhurried. Amanda arrived first this time, sliding into a booth near the window and ordering without waiting. By the time Claire walked in, Amanda was already settled, her coffee untouched but steaming. "You picked a calm place," Amanda said as Claire sat across from her. Claire shrugged, setting her bag down. "I thought we should talk without background noise." "That's generous of you." Claire didn't smile. Amanda noticed that. "Okay," she said, leaning back slightly. "Let's skip the warm-up. What's on your mind?" Claire exhaled, folding her hands loosely on the table. "I don't think he's bad," she said. Amanda blinked once. "That's an encouraging start." "I mean it," Claire continued. "I don't think he's doing anything obviously wrong." "But," Amanda prompted. Claire's gaze sharpened. "But I think you're underestimating how people can change once they get comfortable." Amanda tilted her head slightly. "People changing isn't new information," she said. "That's always been a risk." "This feels different," Claire said. "He's presenting himself as stable, controlled, almost too balanced." Amanda nodded slowly. "And that's a problem?" "It can be," Claire said, "because it's easy to maintain that when things are new, when there's distance." Amanda let that settle before responding. "There isn't distance," she said. "Not in the way you mean." Claire frowned slightly. "You just said he gives you space." "He does," Amanda replied. "But it doesn't feel like distance." Claire didn't answer right away. Amanda could see it, the hesitation, the calculation. "So what does it feel like?" Claire asked finally. Amanda inhaled slowly, searching for words she hadn't needed to define out loud before. "It feels like support," she said. "Like I don't have to prove my availability to keep his attention. Like my time isn't something I owe him." Claire's expression softened, but the doubt didn't disappear. "That sounds good," she said carefully. "But it also sounds like something someone could use to avoid fully committing." Amanda held her gaze. "And what does fully committing look like to you?" she asked. Claire paused. "It looks like being present," she said. "Consistently. Showing that you're invested." Amanda nodded once. "He does that. Without texting all day? Without pushing to see you constantly?" Claire challenged. "Yes." Claire leaned back slightly, studying her. "I just don't want you to get comfortable with something that feels calm now and then shifts later," she said. Amanda sat with that for a moment. Then, quietly, she said, "I've had the opposite before." Claire tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I've had relationships that felt intense at the beginning," Amanda said. "Exciting. Constant communication. Constant presence. Everything felt urgent and important." Claire nodded. "Yeah, and they didn't last," Amanda said. "Or if they did, they became exhausting." Claire didn't argue. Amanda leaned slightly forward, her voice steady but not defensive. "I think we confuse intensity with consistency," she said. "Because intensity feels noticeable. It feels like something is happening all the time. And consistency doesn't?" Claire asked. "Not in the same way," Amanda replied. "Consistency is quieter. It doesn't demand your attention. It just holds it." Claire was silent. Amanda could tell she was listening now, not just preparing a counterpoint. "With Daniel," Amanda continued, "I don't feel like I'm chasing anything. I don't feel like I'm trying to keep something alive." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly, thoughtful. "You feel secure," she said. Amanda considered that, then nodded. "Yes." The word landed gently but firmly. Claire let out a slow breath, looking down at her coffee before meeting Amanda's gaze again. "I don't know if I've ever heard you say that," she admitted. Amanda smiled faintly. "I haven't felt it like this before." Another quiet pause settled between them. Not tense, just reflective. Claire leaned back, crossing her arms loosely. "I still think you should be careful," she said. Amanda nodded. "I am. And not just because he's different." "I know." Claire studied her for a moment longer. "And you're really okay with the way he is?" she asked. Amanda didn't hesitate. "Yes." Claire exhaled softly, then gave a small, reluctant smile. All right, she said. I'll try to reduce my skepticism. Amanda laughed quietly. I appreciate the effort. It's not easy, Claire added. I didn't expect it to be. Later that afternoon, Amanda met Daniel in a familiar spot, a quiet corner of a bookstore cafe where conversations naturally softened. He was already seated, a book closed neatly in front of him. You look thoughtful, he said as she joined him. So do you, she replied. That's my default. Amanda smiled, setting her bag down. I had coffee with Claire, she said. Daniel nodded once. How did that go? Amanda considered the question. It was honest, she said. Constructive, he asked. In its own way. He didn't press further. She appreciated that. They're still not convinced, she added. Daniel's expression didn't change. That's all right, he said. Amanda watched him for a moment. It doesn't bother you? She asked. I understand it, he replied. It's consistent with what they know. Amanda tilted her head slightly. And what do you know? She asked. He met her gaze evenly. I know what I'm doing, he said. The simplicity of it landed with more weight than reassurance would have. Amanda felt that familiar steadiness settle into place again. She leaned back slightly, her expression softening. I realized something today, she said. Daniel waited. I don't want excitement for the sake of it, she said. I don't want something that feels intense just because it's unpredictable. He nodded slowly. That makes sense. I want something I can actually build, she continued. Something that doesn't need constant reinforcement to feel real. Daniel's gaze held hers. That also makes sense, he said. Amanda smiled faintly. I figured you'd say that. He returned the smile just slightly. They sat in quiet for a moment, the kind that had become familiar and unthreatening. Amanda realized, with a sense of clarity that didn't need to be defended or explained, that nothing felt uncertain in this moment. Not his presence. Not his consistency. Not the way he chose to show up. The doubts her friends had voiced hadn't disappeared, but they no longer carried the same weight. Because she wasn't relying on possibility. She was paying attention to reality. And reality, she realized, was simple. Daniel didn't leave gaps for confusion. He didn't blur intention or shift depending on circumstance. He was just there, steady, intentional, present in a way that didn't demand attention, but earned it anyway. Amanda reached for her coffee, her expression calm as she met his gaze again. I'm not trying to be convinced anymore, she said quietly. Daniel's brow lifted slightly. No, she said. I'm just deciding what works for me. And she held his gaze, something certain and grounded settling fully into place. It works. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to, because for the first time, Amanda wasn't waiting for something to prove itself. She already understood what she was choosing. Not spark, not chaos, not something that burned brightly and faded just as quickly, but something steady, something she could stand on. And for the first time in a long time, that choice didn't feel like a compromise. It felt like clarity. Chapter 8. On solid ground, Amanda didn't mark the moment as a turning point. There was no declaration, no carefully planned conversation designed to define what they were becoming. If anything, the absence of that kind of moment was exactly what made everything feel as clear as it did. By the time she realized she had already chosen Daniel, not tentatively, not conditionally, but fully, it no longer felt like a decision. It felt like recognition. It was a quiet Sunday when the realization settled into something permanent. Amanda had spent the morning at her apartment, catching up on a few lingering tasks, not because she had to, but because she wanted to start the week without anything left unfinished. There was a softness to the pace of her day, a lack of pressure she hadn't always allowed herself before. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Daniel, I'm heading to the bookstore. No agenda. You're welcome to join if you feel like it. Amanda smiled as she read it. No agenda. No expectation. Just an open door. She didn't respond immediately. She finished what she was doing, rinsed the mug sitting beside her sink, and stood quietly for a second, considering how she felt. Not rushed. Not obligated. Just interested. Amanda, give me 20 minutes. The reply came shortly after. Daniel, take your time. She smiled again, slipping her phone into her coat pocket. She always did. The bookstore wasn't crowded. The soft murmur of turning pages and quiet footsteps creating a calm, contained rhythm. Amanda found Daniel in the same section as always, nonfiction predictably, standing with a book half open in his hands. You didn't buy it yet, she said as she approached. He glanced up, a faint smile forming. I'm still deciding. You've been deciding about that book for weeks. I like to be thorough. That's not thorough, she said. That's cautious. He closed the book, considering her words. That's also accurate, he admitted. Amanda leaned lightly against the shelf beside him, her expression easy. I think you just like giving yourself time, she said. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Is that different? Yes, she said. Caution assumes something might go wrong. Giving time assumes something is worth understanding first. He watched her for a moment, something thoughtful settling in his gaze. That's a generous interpretation, he said. It's an accurate one, she replied. There was that pause again, the kind they no longer seemed to notice consciously, but always allowed to exist. Amanda didn't rush to fill it. She simply reached for the book in his hands, flipping it open. Have you gotten past chapter 3? She asked. No, he said. She looked up at him, amused. You're stuck on chapter 3? I'm not stuck, he replied calmly. I'm revisiting. Amanda laughed softly. Of course you are. They moved through the bookstore together after that, not in any particular direction, occasionally separating for a few minutes before naturally finding each other again. There was no need to stay side by side constantly, no need to keep checking in, and somehow, she never felt disconnected. Later, they ended up at a nearby cafe, sitting across from each other with the same kind of unhurried ease that had become second nature. Amanda stirred her tea absent-mindedly, watching him for a moment before speaking. My friends still think you're an act, she said. Daniel didn't look surprised. That hasn't changed, he said. No, she admitted. It hasn't. He nodded once, taking a sip of his coffee. Amanda studied him carefully. You still don't feel the need to argue with that, she said. I don't think it's productive, he replied. Why not? Because it's based on their expectations, not my actions, he said. I can't control how they interpret things. Amanda leaned back slightly, absorbing that. No, she said slowly, but you could try to prove them wrong. Daniel set his cup down, meeting her gaze evenly. Over time I will, he said. Or I won't, depending on what they choose to see. Amanda held his gaze, something settling more firmly into place. You're not trying to win them over, she said. I'm trying to be consistent, he replied. And you trust that's enough? I trust that it's accurate, he said. Amanda exhaled softly. There it was again. Not a performance. Not an adjustment based on external pressure. Just alignment. You know what I realized? She said. Daniel's expression softened slightly. What? I don't need them to understand it, she said. He didn't respond right away. Amanda continued, her voice steady. I respect their perspective. I get where it comes from. But it's built on what they're used to, and this isn't that. Daniel nodded slowly. That makes sense, he said. And I'm not trying to change their minds, she added. I'm just choosing differently. The words felt grounded as she said them. Not defensive. Not reactive. Just clear. Daniel watched her, something quiet reflecting in his expression. That's not an easy shift, he said. Amanda smiled faintly. It's easier than pretending I want the same things they do, she replied. He considered that. And what do you want? He asked. Amanda didn't hesitate. This, she said. The simplicity of it hung between them. Unadorned. Certain. Daniel's gaze held hers. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Because the answer wasn't abstract. It wasn't hypothetical. It was right there. In the way they sat across from each other without tension, without performance, without the need to accelerate something just to prove it had motion. Amanda leaned forward slightly, resting her arms on the table. You don't treat this like something temporary, she said. Daniel's response came without hesitation. It isn't. The certainty in his tone didn't carry weight in the way dramatic declarations often did. It wasn't heavy. It was grounded. And somehow that made it stronger. Amanda felt a quiet warmth settle into her chest. Not overwhelming, not consuming, just steady and clear. You don't leave things open to interpretation, she said. I try not to, he replied. You succeed. A brief pause. Then Daniel spoke, his voice just as measured. You don't rush things, he said. Even when it might be easier to. Amanda blinked slightly, surprised. I didn't realize that was noticeable, she said. It is, he replied. And I appreciate it, he said. The words were simple. But unlike before, he didn't deflect them. He didn't minimize them. He just let them exist. Amanda felt another quiet shift, small, but meaningful. You're getting better at that, she said. At what? Accepting things without redirecting them, she said. He considered that. Maybe, he said. That wasn't a deflection, she pointed out. Daniel exhaled softly, a hint of amusement in his expression. Progress, he admitted. Amanda smiled, something steady and certain anchoring deeper within her. This wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about eliminating every hesitation or uncertainty. It was about consistency, growth, mutual understanding. And most importantly, it was shared. When they stepped outside, the late afternoon had shifted toward evening, the light softer, the air cooler. They walked side by side without urgency, their pace naturally aligned. Amanda glanced at him briefly, then ahead again. You weren't wrong, she said after a moment. About what? Time, she replied. It's not complicated. Daniel's brow lifted slightly. That's progress. It is, she said. I used to think I needed more of it, or that I was always running out of it. And now, Amanda slowed slightly, turning her head just enough to look at him. Now I think I just needed to use it differently, she said. Daniel nodded once, his expression thoughtful. That sounds right. Amanda smiled faintly. It does, she agreed. They reached the corner where they would part, familiar now not as an ending but as a natural pause. Amanda didn't feel the need to extend it artificially, and she didn't feel like she was losing anything by letting it be what it was. I'll see you when it works next, she said. Daniel met her gaze. I'll be there, he replied. No urgency, no pressure, just certainty. Amanda nodded, turning to go. As she walked away, she didn't look back, not out of hesitation, but because she didn't need reassurance that he'd still be there. She already knew. And for the first time in her life, that knowing didn't feel fragile. It felt like standing on something solid. Not a spark that might fade. Not a moment that needed to be captured before it disappeared. But a foundation. Something steady. Something chosen. Something real. And most importantly, something she could build her life on. Epilogue. 5 years later, Amanda Perkins no longer thought about time as something she was chasing. It had taken longer than she expected. Longer than a simple shift in mindset. Longer than the steady early rhythm she'd found with Daniel. But the change had settled into her life so completely that she almost couldn't remember what it felt like to live any other way. Almost. There were still moments, fleeting, quiet reminders, when she would catch herself pausing in the middle of a busy day, noticing how different everything felt. Not slower, just intentional. Sunday mornings had become her favorite. Not because they were particularly exciting, they rarely were, but because they carried a kind of consistency she had once underestimated. Amanda stood in the kitchen, sunlight stretching across the counter in soft angles. A half-finished list sat nearby, though she hadn't looked at it in several minutes. You're reorganizing again, Daniel said from the doorway. She glanced over her shoulder, a small smile forming. I'm adjusting, she corrected. That sounds familiar. It should, she said lightly. I learned from experience. Daniel stepped into the kitchen, setting his coffee mug on the counter. The space around them reflected years of shared decisions. Nothing rushed, nothing impulsively chosen. Each addition had arrived with consideration, each detail shaped by a kind of quiet agreement that didn't require constant discussion. It wasn't just a home. It was unmistakably theirs. Amanda slid the list aside without finishing it. I'll get back to that later, she said. Daniel nodded once. You don't have to complete everything immediately. She smiled, tilting her head slightly. I know. You've mentioned that once or twice. I try not to repeat myself. And yet, you're consistent, she said. He glanced at her, a faint trace of amusement in his expression. You're still pointing that out. You're still doing it. A fair exchange. Amanda leaned back against the counter, studying him for a moment. 5 years hadn't changed the core of who he was. That was something her friends had questioned in the beginning. Whether consistency could last. Whether something so steady would eventually fracture under the weight of time, familiarity, expectation. Amanda understood now where that concern had come from. But she also understood why it hadn't applied. Consistency, she had learned, wasn't static. It wasn't about never changing. It was about changing with intention. Daniel still gave her space. Still met her where she was instead of pulling her toward where he thought she should be. Still showed up, fully, quietly, reliably, in ways that didn't demand attention but shaped everything around them. And in return, she had learned to do the same. Not perfectly, but deliberately. We should go out later, Amanda said, pushing off the counter. Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. We have plans this afternoon. I know, she said. I mean after that. He considered her for a moment. That sounds like adding something unnecessary, he said. It might be, she admitted. He waited. Amanda smiled faintly. Or it might just be something we feel like doing. A pause. Then, all right, he said. We'll decide when we get there. Amanda nodded, satisfied. That was always how it worked. Nothing forced. Everything chosen. Later that afternoon, Amanda found herself sitting across from Claire at the same cafe where they had once had that careful, skeptical conversation years earlier. The setting felt familiar, but the dynamic had shifted entirely. Claire stirred her drink slowly, watching Amanda with a thoughtful expression. You were right, she said. Amanda raised an eyebrow. About what? Claire exhaled lightly. About him. Amanda didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. I didn't see it at first, Claire continued. I thought it was too controlled, too calm, like something that would eventually break. Amanda nodded slightly. That made sense, she said. Based on what we were used to. Claire smiled faintly. Yeah, we didn't exactly have great examples. No, Amanda agreed. There was a pause. But it didn't break, Claire said. Amanda shook her head gently. No, she said. It didn't. Claire leaned back, her expression softening. It changed, though, she pointed out. Of course it did, Amanda said. Everything does. But not in the way I expected, Claire added. Amanda smiled. That's because you were expecting something dramatic. Claire laughed quietly. That's fair. And this was never that, Amanda said. Claire studied her for a moment. No, she said. It wasn't. Amanda picked up her cup, tracing her finger lightly along the edge before setting it back down. It's not about avoiding change, she said. It's about not needing things to be unstable in order to feel real. Claire nodded slowly. I get that now, she said. Amanda met her gaze, something steady and settled in her expression. I wanted to build something, she said. And you did. Amanda smiled, a quiet warmth settling into her chest. Yes, she said simply. That evening, Amanda and Daniel walked side by side through a familiar stretch of the city, the light fading gradually into something softer. They hadn't planned anything specific. They didn't need to. So, Daniel said after a few moments, was coffee productive? Amanda considered the question. It was reflective, she said. That sounds like your version of productive. It probably is. He glanced at her. What did you reflect on? Amanda smiled slightly. The beginning, she said. Daniel's expression shifted, just enough to register interest. That's a long time ago, he said. It doesn't feel like it, she replied. He nodded once. Things haven't changed as much as people expected, she added. Daniel looked ahead, thoughtful. They've changed, he said. Just not unpredictably. Amanda smiled. Exactly. They walked a little further in quiet. Not empty, not disconnected, just steady. Amanda slowed slightly, turning her head to look at him. You know, she said. You were right at the very beginning. Daniel glanced at her. About what? You weren't trying to control my time, she said. You were trying to be part of it. He considered that, then nodded. That was the idea. Amanda smiled, that same quiet certainty settling into place. The one that had been with her for years now, unchanged in its foundation even as everything else had grown. It worked, she said. Daniel didn't respond with anything grand. He didn't need to, because the answer was already there, in the way they moved through life, in the space they gave each other without losing connection, in the trust that had never required constant proof. It wasn't a spark. It wasn't something fleeting. It wasn't built on urgency or performance or the need to hold onto something before it disappeared. It was something else entirely. Something steady. Something intentional. Something real. Amanda looked ahead again, her pace matching his without effort. And as the evening settled quietly around them, she realized there was nothing left to question. No doubts to revisit. No uncertainty waiting to surface. Just a life that had been built piece by piece on something solid. And it still was.